When the news came out recently that our petition to Rome for the establishment of the permanent diaconate in the Philippines had been approved, nag-viral ito sa social media. And I did not realize that so many people found the idea of having married deacons in the Philippines a very welcome development. Kaya lang, there were a few who privately expressed to me their apprehensions about it. They thought of it as another innovation daw under the papacy of Pope Francis. Obviously, there are many Filipinos who do not know that the re-establishment of a permanent diaconate open to married candidates happened already after the Second Vatican Council and has existed in most Roman Catholic dioceses around the world long before Pope Francis became Pope. When people react to Pope Francis and say that he is changing a lot of things and that things should just be left the way they have always been since the beginning, sometimes I shake my head and just smile to myself, wishing that I could tell them, you don't know what you are talking about. Since Vatican II, the Church has actually been very busy returning to its sources, especially the Scriptures and the Apostolic Tradition. Yung first reading natin ngayon, galing kay 1 Timothy, was written in the 1st century. Hindi siya isang bagong proposal. It's not coming from some liberals or progressives in the church who are insisting to change church doctrine and policies in order to introduce some innovations. Aba, galing kay St. Paul, the apostle himself, explaining the requirements sa pag-uobispo at pagdidiakono. And I'm sure medyo natawa yung iba sa inyo. Well, take note in what we heard. He is not requiring the bishops and the deacons to be celibates. Kaya nakakagulat ng kaunti, ang sabi niya, the one who will become a bishop must be married only once. And must prove, to be a good steward to his own children, his own family. Ibig sabihin, itong mga ordained ministries were never meant to be exclusive to the unmarried or celibates. But, if some candidates are married, sabi naman ni St. Paul, they should be married only once. If some of them get widowed, they are admonished not to remarry again. And so you see, we often forget that the exclusion of married candidates to the office of bishops, the office of presbyters, and the office of deacons is actually quite a late development in the history of the church. Bandang 11th century na yan. It is obvious that the reasons for this later decision to make the ordained ministry exclusive to celibates were more practical than theological. They're not even Bible-based. The Latin Church went for an exclusive celibate ordained ministry, obviously on the presupposition that celibates, unlike the married clerics, would be relatively low maintenance baga, if I may put it that way. So you may also have been surprised. The second surprise in the first reading was about the women among them? Yes, may mga babaeng diakonesa. There were women deacons in the community that St. Paul was talking about. Well, merong iba who are against the idea of making the diaconate open again to women the way it was in the first century. Kaya medyo iba yung interpretasyon nila sa pagbasa. They say, yung women daw na binabanggit ni St. Paul are the wives of the deacons. But, check out the footnoted commentary of the New American Bible, which was produced by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And it says there that the interpretation of the women here as women deacons, mga diakonesa, is to be preferred. It is correct. It says, kung deacons' wives ang tinutukoy dito, you would expect him to say, they're women. Pero wala eh. Inintroduce pa niya ng similarly the women, meaning the women among the deacons. And so it suggests that women also exercised ecclesiastical functions in the first century church. And sure enough, sa Romans chapter 16, verse 1, merong ini-endorso si St. Paul, a certain female deacon na ang pangalan ay Phoebe. He's endorsing her as an ordained deacon to the community of Christians in Rome. Yung mga Eastern Catholic churches, unlike the Roman Catholic or Latin Catholic Church, which unfortunately is the only Christian tradition that most Filipino Catholics are familiar with, the Eastern Catholics have not followed this policy of restricting the ordained ministries to celibates only. Kaya meron din silang married clergy. Well, sometimes, I feel that the church is like the grieving widow of Nain in the gospel reading today. That widow who touches the heart of Jesus. And how moved Jesus must have been to see this woman, instead of accompanying her youthful son to his own wedding, she's walking by the hearse that was carrying the cadaver of this young boy for burial. Jesus couldn't afford to just watch such a pathetic sight. And so, he went out of his way to rouse this young man and bring him back to life and restore him and give him back to his widowed mother. He would later do exactly the same thing with another young man, the brother of Martha and Mary of Bethany. You know his name, Lazarus. How Jesus would command his friend Lazarus to come out of the tomb, and how he would order the people, tumulong naman kayo. Ang sabi niya, unbind him. Kalagin niyo siya. Unbind him. I imagine Jesus asking us also to do a lot of unbinding to bring the church back to life again.